You are now listening to the Region 10 Report with your host, Susanne Posel from OccupyCorporatism.com, where the alternative media gets their news. This show will expose the elite domination plan, disinfo agents, propaganda, and the UN plan to strip the world of its freedom and the United States of its Constitution. This is the Region 10 Report with Susanne Posel, bringing you the real truth behind the news.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Hope you're having a good evening. This is Susanne Posel. You're listening to the Region 10 Report. I am joined by my co-host, David Posel. Tonight, we are going to discuss directed energy weapons. I want to discuss the Iron Dome. I also want to discuss other directed energy weapons that we've heard about in the news, and they've kind of been downplayed, so we don't think anything of it. But this is free energy microwave directed energy technology that is being used, weaponized against us. Israel is going to be using it against the people of Palestine and Gaza. And also what happened on 9/11. A lot of work by Dr. Judy Wood and some other people who have been working on understanding what directed energy weapons are, how far advanced our government is in this technology. So if you are interested in Dr. Judy Wood, you can go to drjudywood.com. You can also go to Where Did the Towers Go? WhereDidTheTowersGo.com. If you'd like to follow us throughout the week, our website is OccupyCorporatism.com. And if you'd like to listen to any of the broadcasts, you can download them on Spreaker.com, on iTunes Radio. You can also go to radio.occupycorporatism.com, and you can listen to any of our broadcasts, including the Real News Report that is broadcast on RBN. We now have radio.occupycorporatism.com. I encourage you to listen to me 7 days a week on the Pete Santilli Show, which is broadcast on RBN as well as on Blog Talk Radio. His website is thepetesantillishow.com. And I perform the Bunker News Break. We read news, we laugh, we have a good time. And I encourage you to keep listening because he is one of the best radio show hosts out there. So let's go ahead and get into the directed energy weapons. Now, recently, we heard about the U.S. government giving the Israelis the Iron Dome. And the Iron Dome is very misleading because it has directed energy weapon capabilities, but it also has Patriot missile capabilities.
Yeah, Patriot missiles are really the cover. That's how they initiated this and said, okay, this is just a missile tracking and defense system. And we use Patriot missiles and other types of missiles to intercept incoming targets. And with our new research, I think that's quite misleading, like you said.
So it was confirmed that Israel has initiated the attack on Hamas, and in Gaza, where they're killing Palestinians. The action began as the Operation Pillar of Cloud, which is a reference to a very carefully planned military endeavor. And this carefully planned military endeavor includes using directed energy weapons. So on OccupyCorporatism.com, I would like to direct you to an article that I wrote, Israeli Attack on Gaza Excuse to Test U.S.-Funded Death Ray, called the Iron Dome. And inside that article is a rare video of what the Iron Dome is capable of doing. See, the directed weapons energy technology will create an energy force field around whatever area the weapon system is securing. And it's invisible. We cannot see this. But on the video, when you go to the website, what you will see is these rockets that have been shot from Gaza heading toward Israel. And once they hit this energy field, they disintegrate. They don't shoot up a Patriot missile and intercept these two rockets and blast them out of the sky, because that would mean that there would be remnants of the original missile. Well, both missiles would fall out of the sky. There'd be shrapnel everywhere. These two missiles literally come flying through the air, and then all of a sudden you hear pop, pop, and they disintegrate into black dots in the air, and that's it. And I had to watch it a few times to really understand what I was seeing. Because that doesn't make any sense to me. When something explodes, there is a fallout. Correct? When we blow up a building, it comes down. There's a fallout.
Something comes down. I mean, it's obviously made out of something. Even if it explodes, even if it were a conventional explosion like it's intended to do, all of those pieces would still be there. I mean, you can go, to south of Los Alamos where they tested our first nuclear bomb here in the United States, and there are little tiny pieces of stuff all over the place, and you can go pick it up right now.
Right. So what we are seeing is something absolutely 100% unequivocally completely different than anything that we've seen before. These two rockets, I have to say it again, folks, please go watch this video. They fly in through the sky, and they hit this energy force field, and they disappear. They disintegrate. Now, when I was watching this, it reminded me of something else that disintegrated, and that happened 11 years ago. On 9/11, we thought we saw two towers, the Twin Towers at the World Trade Center. We thought they fell. We thought we saw them fall. In fact, a lot of 9/11 truthers have been telling us for the last decade or more that they fell. A lot of people who are prominent in the alternative media swear that they fell. So the evidence of thermite, and we'll get to what that meant. We'll explain that to you later on in the broadcast, but the evidence of thermite happens to be their smoking gun, that the controlled demolition and Building 7 is evidence that this was a controlled demolition, and therefore the buildings were brought down because they blew them up like they blew up the Moore building.
Yeah.
And up until recently, I agreed with that. But upon researching Dr. Judy Wood's information, as well as other information. Folks, I have been watching as many documentaries as I can get my hands on, whether it's true or not. I'm in research mode, and this is something I encourage all of you to do, to research the information yourself. Judy Wood's information was brought to me by a friend of mine, and I looked at it. I watched a couple of her lectures, and it sent me off going to anything and everything I could get my hands on, and I'm still researching. But I've come to some strong conclusions, and that's why I'm bringing this episode to you today, because I want you to understand what I have come to understand and what I'm still learning, because as I'm learning more, I'm going to keep bringing this up, because directed energy weapons is something that they have been talking about since the 1980s. The U.S. government and the Russian government have had this undercover fight to get to the directed energy weapons. Who's got the biggest, who's got the baddest, and who's first. And this is going back to the 1980s.
Star Wars.
Even before Star Wars.
True.
Star Wars was a manifestation of this.
Well, HARRP was where they started out. Star Wars was what they wanted to do with HARRP in order to weaponize it for, an alien attack, a space invasion. The famous Ronald Reagan speech.
So I'm starting to understand that there is technology out there that is twofold for me. First of all, it uses free energy that is not metered, energy that cannot be defined by a monetary system. J.P. Morgan took back his financing from Tesla because he wanted to use the ionosphere and create free energy for everyone. So you no longer had to plug yourself into the grid and get metered and pay somebody for that usage. Now you could just take the energy from the universe, from everywhere. There's electrical energy inside this room I'm sitting in. There's electrical energy inside the room you're sitting in, outside of your house, in your car. It doesn't matter. It's everywhere.
It's infinite.
And so Tesla wanted to harness this in order to redirect it through so that we could use it in our outlets. Mm-hmm. And we could use it to run our machines and our technology and continue on as technology progressed, better harnessing this energy so that we wouldn't have to worry about lines and metering and paying for electricity anymore.
There are quite a few people that have figured out the vortex energy patterns, and they're running absolutely free right now. They're already doing it. It's just that the government essentially kills anybody who comes up with or publicizes the information on how to do it.
Right. If you go to YouTube and you put in the search Taurus energy generators, mm-hmm. you will find people have converted their cars to run on Taurus energy. You will find that people have converted their homes to run on Taurus energy. all of any equipment, including equipment that you use around the house. You know, maybe your refrigerator, maybe your generator, anything that can be electrically charged and use electricity to run can be converted through a torus generator, which takes the energy from the room and reconfigures it through so that you can plug into it.
Yeah, it's an energy conditioner. It just takes all of those particles that we can't see, and as they hit, it's a positive boom, and then it stores it all up and sticks it all out. I mean, this thing is the size of a toaster, and it can start your car. It's amazing.
See, you don't need oil. Well, that takes care of the oil industry.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need electricity. Well, that takes care of all of our nuclear power and utilities companies.
Mm-hmm.
So we're taking money out of some big people's pockets if we're using this technology.
Yeah, that's why a lot of people have disappeared, and people will speculate that that's the whole thing behind Tesla. But we need to go to a break. We're going to come right back, and when we get back, we're going to go quite a bit deeper into the actual details of these things and really start connecting the dots for you guys. So hold on, we'll get you on the other side.
TV. The future is in your hands.
Hi, folks. Thanks for joining us again. You're listening to the Region 10 Report. I'm Susanne Posel. At the beginning of the broadcast, we started talking about the Iron Dome, so I want to start there because I think it's important to start with what's happening today and then inch our way back through time so that we can understand how this all came about, and then maybe come full circle again and re-explain how this all works so that you understand how destructive and how dangerous the Iron Dome truly is and what it represents. So the Iron Dome missile defense system is publicly slated as a shield that is being used to stop rockets shot out from Gaza and averting Israeli targets from being hit. Its accuracy rate is an alarming 90%. And the Rafael Advanced Defense System, which is a state-sponsored defense contractor, they are owned by the Israeli government, along with 3 other Israeli corporations, have come together to build this weapon of mass destruction. The U.S. has funded the creation of the Iron Dome to the tune of $310 million, taxpayer money. And by the way, Netanyahu called Obama to thank him and the U.S. people. So, by the way, Netanyahu thanked you. If you're listening to the show, Netanyahu thanked you for giving him directed energy weapons technology. So you should feel good about that. Well, maybe not. But don't be despaired, because we're going to be sending them another $610 million over the next 3 years. So, yay, the United States.
Yeah, $1 billion later. Thanks for adding that to our deficit.
So the Iron Dome will assess a threat level of a rocket with its surveillance systems and compromise of a management center using radar detection. And the missile, if it is deemed a threat, the Iron Dome will emit microwave frequency to destroy the missile. That is exactly what you see when you go to visit OccupyCorporatism.com and watch that video. You will see the microwave frequency destroy. And when I say destroy, I mean disintegrate these 2 missiles. No fire, no explosion, no shrapnel, no downfall. Just 2 black dots in the sky, and that's it. So when I saw these 2 black dots in the sky, I thought, this reminds me of all of the disintegration happening on 9/11. This reminds me of all of that dust, that huge plume of dust, that in a normal implosion. And my husband is from Seattle. Why don't you, because this is the famous example that everyone gives, and you were there when they brought down the King Dome.
Oh, yeah, everybody was there.
So explain to the listeners, as a Seattleite, what you saw when you saw the King Dome come down.
Well, you got to realize the King Dome, I mean, this is a full-size sports stadium in the first place. Of course, it was replaced by Safeco Field, but this thing, when you drive by it on the freeway, it's huge. It's absolutely huge. Purely made out of concrete. It had, internalized everything, actually. So This is a very heavy, well-built structure. I mean, everything was 4 or 5 feet thick, the main beam structures. And they brought this thing down, and like Judy Wood was talking about, it doesn't fall in an absolute free fall because they didn't know what the calculation is there. It's a few seconds longer than that. The amount of debris left over, that's something that becomes a major contention point, because when you look at the Kingdom, and you can actually watch this on YouTube, it's one of the most documented implosions of a building.
So it will pancake itself.
Well,
so each level falls down, the top level falls down on the next level, the next level, the next level.
Well, sort of. I mean, we'll get to that when we talk about 9/11, because the Kingdom doesn't have levels. The Kingdom is an open center stadium, so the outside edges are the most important part. So that's what they did is they exploded the center cap first, so that it would begin the crumbling process to come in on itself. Because you got to realize they were building the other structures right next to it. This isn't right in the middle of downtown Seattle. Not in a center core, but it's off to one side. But it's in the industrial business area. So
what do they use to destroy or to implode the Kingdom?
No, they just C4'd the main structures. It was really simple. They just C4'd it. They popped them all in a certain order. They went from the center to the outside. It destroyed itself. But when you look at the debris, there were major timbers still. Timbers, beams, still in the center. They were intact. There were chunks of this building all over the place.
Not a lot of dust.
Right.
Is what you're
the
saying.
Dust cloud doesn't rise higher than the original height of the building, but possibly up to a third more. And that's true. You didn't see a whole lot because the particulate matter in an explosion, this is really just cracking rock and steel and breaking it down into smaller pieces. This is like going out and smashing something with a hammer. It's not going to leave a bunch of dust.
When you look at what happened in the Kingdom, and we're understanding that it's a compromised example because it's not an actual building, it has a lot of open areas, kind of like an atrium would have. It's got an open center. And so it doesn't have a lot of levels. But that is the example that I see everybody using on YouTube, and a lot of 9/11 truthers use the Kingdom as an example. So because you said it was one of the most televised implosions,
Yeah.
So how does this relate to what happened on 9/11? Because I wasn't there, but I remember my mother calling me, saying, turn on any channel, it doesn't matter. And literally, it didn't matter. Any channel that you turned on was the exact same thing. Even cable television was showing it. And I remember watching the second plane fly into the building. And I remember, because when I had gotten to the television, the first plane had already hit, and I thought I was watching a movie. And then, after some time, 7 hours later, right, we see the buildings, and this is probably the last time you're ever going to hear me use this phrase, guys. The buildings come down.
The buildings came down in 108 minutes, but the Trade Tower 7 came down later on that afternoon.
Yes. Okay. So that was the 7 hours. So we were watching this fiasco, this scenario unfold, and I saw with the Iron Dome the disintegration of 2 rockets. These 2 missiles that are not small. They're about how long would you say that they are? I'm 5 foot tall. How long would they be?
Well, they're probably
My height?
no, actually, they're much bigger than that. It's deceptive. When you get right next to something, it's a lot bigger than what it looks like from a distance. I think that a standard rocket is probably a good 25 feet or so.
Okay, so a 25-foot rocket disintegrates into a tiny little cloud of black dust.
Yeah.
In the middle of the air.
No fire, no nothing.
No fire, no explosion to make that happen. It gets to a certain point in the air and then it disintegrates.
And then the one behind it does the same thing.
All right. So we see the buildings disintegrate, right?
Right in front of our eyes. Yeah.
So how should we start this explanation for people?
Well, I think that's really kind of where the example of the Kingdom ends, because the Kingdom was just a straight implosion. It's pretty simple. It went, it became a bunch of chunks. And I think that's really where the similarities end. When you look at the Twin Towers, there's a whole different situation happening here. Those chunks that were falling, as Judy Wood points out, are just basically disintegrate. They don't even hit the ground. 100 stories later, it's not even there anymore. It's gone. And the whole building, piece after piece after piece, from the top to the bottom, is the same way.
What I found interesting was 110 stories, you would have 13 stories worth of debris down at the ground, but instead you only had 3 stories worth of debris.
Yeah, if you're looking at a classical model, that would be true, but we're talking about something that we've never seen before. This is absolutely different. In a classical model, yes, there would be 13 stories of debris. The buildings on the side would have been damaged, all sorts of things. There would have been I-beams sticking through stuff. That's not what happened here. There was very few remnants. The I-beams weren't there. Where did the damn planes go? Where were those jet engines? Did they melt somehow in a kerosene fire? Because that's what was really happening. That was a kerosene fire. That's what planes run on. I mean, really, this whole thing is an absolute hoax, and it unravels more and more the more you look at her work. This dust cloud is really the smoking gun.
The dust cloud, right. So let's talk about directed energy weapons. Let's talk about how HARRP is used in conjunction, possibly a technology weapon that we don't know about. But let's talk about how HARRP directs the waves, the microwaves, the different waves that are available to them to use, and how they incorporate them to direct energy to a specific place, like the Twin Towers.
Well, this is where you want to go in and do some heavy research with Dr. Nick Begich. He's really the HARRP specialist. Definitely plan to have him on our show. He's already been on Pete Santilli. Guy really knows what he's doing. And here's how it works. HARRP has a carrier wave. It sends out ultra-low frequencies, no different than what your speakers are putting out right now, but just in a very large, fine-tuned way. This is not something you can see. There's no
Is this the sine
light.
wave?
Yes, and this is a sine wave, which it transfers as what they call a scalar wave. When you're looking at the clouds and you see those ripples, that's what it is. The denser energy settles to the bottom of the sine wave. The higher energy is at the top. The water vapors automatically will want to go to the path of least resistance. When it gets to the higher frequency, basically those molecules are turned more or less sideways because of the actual amount of energy being put through them. So you look right through it; it's clear. And so that's why the sky looks like ripples. You're like, wow, go look at Dutch Sense. He's got it. It's all over the place. He's got it down.
So when they're emitting these sine waves, what we're seeing is the ripples in the clouds, and that is the clouds following the sine wave.
Well, it's the effect of the sine wave on the cloud. The water molecules will follow the energy pattern to the path of least resistance, and that's really what you're seeing. The bottom half of those sine waves, the top halves are cut off, and that's what it looks like, circular patterns. In a defense or a weapon type system, now that technology takes a jump. Okay, so the sine wave is very soft and round and very smooth, and it gets things moving and moving and moving, and then it's kind of like the ocean, and all of a sudden everything turns to jelly, and that's really what happens. It liquefies. It's still
on a molecular
solid.
level.
Yeah, it liquefies on a molecular level. It's all vibrating at one frequency, and everything's real smooth. But then, if it's like breaking the silence, then what they'll do is they jam a square wave right in the middle of that, a super high frequency square wave. They don't stop the carrier wave, the sine wave, which is keeping everything jello. And this square wave will go in there, and it just hits it like a jackhammer. It literally smashes all of the constituent materials, all the pieces. It takes all of the atoms, the electrons, the protons, neutrons, and throws them out of whack, throws them out of place. And then that's where the weakness of the structure comes in. That's when the materials begin to degrade and fall apart as far as their structural integrity. Toasting of the cars, things like that. And then, and this is the third stage, which I think is really the thing that does it. They can take that wave and then modulate it even further, turn it into what they call a sawtooth wave, which is kind of a triangular form. And a square wave, when converted, it's very simple for them to do. When they convert that, it turns into this triangle wave that really it's like a really high pitched scream whine kind of sound, and if you were to hear it, and what it does is it absolutely throws everything apart. It throws all of the bonding materials apart. All of the constituent materials of this building itself will then they decide to fall apart. The whole thing, the metals become one with the concrete. The concrete becomes one with everything next to it. I mean, there are a few things that are harder for that.
So what actually happens is the sine wave is turning molecularly. The sine wave is turning the building to jelly, and then they jam these other frequencies into the sine wave. The square and the jigsaw, and this explodes it on a molecular level, which the manifestation physically is the dust that we were seeing, correct?
Yes, it brings what looks like a solid material down to base molecular level. It throws it all apart, and it becomes smaller and smaller and smaller particles, nanoparticles, whatever it is, down to the atomic level. And then when they're out of the sphere of influence of this wave pattern, and they try to reconnect, there's nothing to reconnect to. Once those electrons have moved out and it doesn't have that anymore, it's no longer that element. It's no longer that element. That's all there is to it. Elements are very, very scientifically, put together. If it doesn't have the exact right balance and everything's in the right place, that's not what it is anymore. It's just a base material.
Right, so we wouldn't see the airplane anymore. We wouldn't see the chairs. We wouldn't even see the structure of the building or the people in it because they are no longer chairs and people and buildings and planes.
Well, yeah, dust to dust. It all falls back to its original constituent materials. It's just like space dust. It's no different.
So when we saw these buildings come down and we saw these pieces falling from the sky and or falling from the building, and if you watch the videotape that Dr. Judy Wood brings, there are steel beams that start to come down, and as they start to fall, they disintegrate into thin air and into nothing. And you can see that on the videotape. You can see the huge chunks of the side of the building falling within the dust, and as they fall, the faster they fall, the faster they dustify. So what are we witnessing when we're seeing that, when we think that we're seeing pieces of the building coming down, and they fell down like Dr. G. Wood explains, like you peel a banana? Is that indicative at all of a controlled demolition?
No, what that is that's the metals trying to get away from the emanation source of the frequency. And once it does that, the more oxygen, of course, in the atmosphere, the better, because the oxygenation is what causes the actual destruction along with the frequency. Anybody who's really done any real research in chemistry realizes that fire and explosions and all these things, it's actually just a rapid oxidation of an element, and that's it. Any explosion anywhere all it is a rapid oxidation of a material. And some things oxidize faster than others, and it creates more or less heat. And what we're looking at here is essentially a cold fusion process where the oxidation happens at room temperature. And a lot of people are corroborating that. They say that this huge, cloud, well, now they're willing to call it a dust cloud, it was actually cool. It was cooler than the ambient temperature in New York City in that day.
Right, so if you had an explosion that would take a huge source of heat, and you would think that everything surrounding it or affected by it would be hot.
Oh yeah, it burned everything.
And so they're saying that this wasn't the case.
But it didn't. No, there's papers flying through the air. I mean, it didn't happen. Those cars that were toasted had papers in them.
Right, how could there be... And there were cars that spontaneously exploded.
Right, but the papers stayed intact.
Right. So this is this is a technology, like I said in the beginning, folks, this is a technology that we haven't seen utilized before. We don't understand. We see the effects of it. It's obviously not a controlled demolition. But we're looking at all of these effects thinking, how do we explain this? And so when we get back from this break, I want to go more into detail about the controlled demolition theory, about the thermite, as well as continuing to explain the effects that we saw and how it all ties back to this directed energy technology that we know that they're using, and we're seeing that they're using it right now, and now it's in the hands of the Israelis. We'll be right back, folks. Don't go away. You do not want to miss this.
Strive to be the voice of the voiceless, for those who stood up and spoke out for freedom and liberty. Get involved, because we all determine our own level of involvement.
UCY.TV. The future is in your hands.
Hello guys, thanks for coming back with us. You're listening to the Region 10 report, and before we went to the break, we were talking about what happened on 9/11, and let's get right back into it, Dave. Let's talk about the HARRP system and tie it into the active denial system, which is being used by the military right now, and it's also been used in Afghanistan. So let's get right into it.
Okay, well, the HARP system works with different wave frequencies. It usually uses different types of sine waves. Okay, so it's not something that they're using actively as a kill technology. Now, that may be incorrect in the future, or may be proved wrong. But at this point, that's what I can see. The active denial system is a modified hybrid version. It's, let's say, Generation 2. And it is definitely a place where they use higher frequencies in the middle of that carrier frequency. And they've identified which frequencies operate more like a microwave and less like a nice little sauna.
So what this does, what they say on their website, and if you go to occupycorporatism.com and look at the article on the Iron Dome, you can click on the hyperlink for the active denial system and go and see what the military says about it. But just a brief few sentences. They say that it heats up the water molecules in your skin and causes you to move out of the way. You have to move out of the way because literally you're starting to cook from the inside.
That's absolutely true, actually, and that's precisely what's going on. Water molecules will cook faster. It obviously vibrates, like if you've seen the Emoto experiments, it vibrates very well sympathetically with whatever's going on in the environment. So that is what's going on. But they claim in these systems that it only goes 64th of an inch down or whatever. It's not actually going to cause any major harm, but there is quite a bit of proof to say otherwise. And the active denial system that they were using in the Afghanistan,
in Iraq,
well, yeah, Iraq as well. But Iraq is where there were major reports. I mean, the doctors were like baffled. What the heck is this? What's going on? There are people that are absolutely burned. There's no bullet holes. There's no shooting. There's no sound. There's no nothing. All of a sudden, they got half their face cooked off. I mean, down to the bone. These people, it's absolutely disgusting what they did to these people. This technology, this active denial system, and they're denying it actively that they even have it, or they're using it at this level. But it is possible. I think this is what's going on right now with the Iron Dome. I think that they've got a 3.0 version of this, where they've got a much larger unit, very different frequency tones that they're using inside of that. Maybe, like I was saying, 3-stage tones like in 9/11, and they're using these to just absolutely destroy anything in their path, and it works. It absolutely works. I mean, up to miles away.
So let me tell these people about the Boeing Phantom. In Boeing's Phantom Works, they have brought the Counter Electronics High Power Microwave Advanced Missile Project, or CHAMP. This is being tested in the Utah desert at the Utah Test and Training Range with the assistance of the Hill Air Force Base. And this is technology that will allow the government defense authorities to use beams of microwave technology to destroy targets without causing collateral damage. CHAMP emits bursts of high-powered energy that not only knocks out electronic subsystems, but also directs selective high-frequency radio waves that can strike multiple targets in a single session.
Wow. See, that's even better. So it's widespread. They can get multiple targets at one time. Now, doesn't this remind you of 9/11? How many towers went down?
Several.
Right. Not just one. Not just in a central place, which is what a lot of people are talking about. Well, okay, so that they use a satellite, they beamed it straight down, and it only hit 1 and 2. Well, that's not true. It took out all the other buildings around it too, and then the Trade Tower 7 went down hours and hours later, and it's off to one side. So while this one in the center is dustifying, the one on the other side is slowly crumbling and falling apart, and it too falls apart in the end in the same way, and it's got the large cavity in the center. And it looks like, I think that's really the distraction. It looks like a planned implosion. It looks like they strapped a bunch of, like they detonated a bunch of bombs underneath it. But
so let's talk about the smoking gun that the 9/11 truthers use, which is thermite.
Well,
thermite was present.
Yeah.
Okay, so
thermite.
What is thermite for people who don't know? What exactly is thermite?
It's iron oxide and aluminum oxide in a much smaller level. The most effective one is the nanoparticle size, which is in the microns, and just because it's more active, it has more surface area. Therefore, it can oxidize faster. More surface area means oxygen can attack more parts of the molecule, in a faster amount of time. So what they're saying is that they found all of these sort of nano and microparticles of thermite. But we have to remember, and this seems like common sense, but not really until you've done the research on this whole technology system, is that under the HARRP frequency and under these different frequencies, what it does, its whole purpose is to break everything down to its elemental molecular form. The atomic and subatomic particles are destroyed, they're thrown out, and then it tries to rejoin. And when it tries to rejoin, it's down to its base constituent materials. So we now have nanoparticles. That's all that can rejoin. That's this. What didn't get completely obliterated and turned into space dust is still aluminum and iron. That's
so the materials of the building then appear to be, once they're dustified, thermite,
right.
Nanothermite.
Exactly. Yeah, it's dust.
So this information actually throws out the theory that because they found traces of nanothermite, that the controlled demolition actually happened, because what they're actually seeing is the fine materials of the building itself.
It's the end result. Exactly. There's nothing else it could be.
So we have a situation where even in the destruction of these buildings, there is evidence of misunderstanding of what we're looking at, because we don't understand what happened that day.
Well, I think they directed the 9/11 Commission to look at it that way. I think that they did some research, because we've got to remember they got all that stuff out of there very quickly. It all went to a top secret location or whatever, shipped offshore. There was no investigation allowed.
They didn't even investigate how the towers fell.
They only got to see little pieces of the tower. What was left, the solid constituents that were left of the tower, which were not directly affected, let's say, from this thing. They may have taken the corners that didn't even get affected and said, okay, here's this, so that when you look at it under a microscope or on a molecular level, you don't see anything wrong. It all looks normal. But in reality, the thing you should be looking at's up in the sky.
So what about these toasted cars? Because they weren't just found across the bay. They were found directly in front of the building. I mean, a line of cars completely toasted, except, like you said earlier, there was paper inside the cars, all strewn all over the floor, all over the ground, surrounding the cars. So if there was an explosion, wouldn't paper be combustible?
Oh, it would have been gone instantly, yeah. I mean, just by being close to it that would have happened. But here's my theory on this, and I think this is probably pretty valid, is that the inductive frequency that was put into that building went through the main wires. Now, you've got to realize, on a high-rise, the wires are the size of your car that run this thing. I mean, it goes straight from the power company right into their underground. That supply line, wherever it went to and came from, that is probably how this happened. I think that the inductive frequency that they shoved into that building went through those wires backwards, and it actually created an electromagnetic resonance around it. It creates a sort of an electromagnet, and whatever was on the street directly above those wires ended up getting hit by that frequency, by a sympathetic force. And what's the most solid, most magnetic part of a car? Well, it's the engine block. Everybody knows that. You pull up to a stoplight, you see those round things in the ground. That's what that is. It's something that reads the magnetism of your car. It wants to see your engine block. When it sees your engine block, it switches the light, and it goes green, and you go. So this is the same sort of thing. It seeks it out. It finds the heaviest targets it can. It brings it to it and melts it by way of frictional force, and that's what you get. I mean, but all that stuff falls apart under heavy electromagnetic frequencies. And I think this is how the cars at such a distance had, more or less become toasted, like she says, where the front half of the car is absolutely obliterated, melted, gone far beyond belief. The metal has no structure left whatsoever, spontaneously combusted. And the back half of the car still has the wax, and it's perfect. And you can open the doors and close them, and everything's fine.
So just so everybody knows, directed energy weapons emit energy aimed in the direction of a target by transferring energy through a directed beam. And this energy could be electromagnetic radiation, particles with mass, or sound or sonic weapons. Now, microwave guns that are sanctioned by the U.S. government, which are directed energy weapons, include the active denial system, which we spoke about, It claims to use a millimeter wave source that heats the water in the target's skin and thus causes an incapacitating pain. So you literally have to get out of the way of this thing. The Vigilant Eagle, an airport defense system that directs high-frequency microwaves toward projectiles that are fired at aircraft. And supposedly we have these at our airports. Mm-hmm. And the Bofors HPM Blackout, a high-powered microwave weapon system which is able to destroy at a distance a very wide variety of commercial off-the-shelf electronic equipment. Mm-hmm. So it makes sense, right? Electronical equipment use wires, but they also use frequency.
I think you're talking about an EMP here, where actually what it does is it disrupts the memory inside of the microchips, and therefore they no longer can function, because we've got to realize that microchips are just a series of transistors in a super micro format. You have to use a microscope to see them. And if they're not programmed correctly to do their function, they no longer function. That's it. They don't know what to do. They can't keep time. They can't retain their base programming. None of their functions work.
So in the 1990s, the U.S. government patented an electromagnetic directed energy pulse launcher that utilizes Maxwell's equations, Maxwell's scalar waves equations, to produce localized pulses of wave energy, such as electromagnetic or acoustic energy, which propagate over long distances without divergence. So what does that mean? Long distances which propagate long distances without divergence.
Well, that's what I was talking about with the HARRP waves. These are very long, low frequencies, ultra low frequencies, which have the ability to penetrate, all the way through the Earth. As a matter of fact, they're using this for communication with submarines and things like that, because it doesn't see any solid material as a blocker. It's so long range and so low a frequency. It just goes through everything. So that's how they can keep the integrity of that wave over long distances. That's essentially how HARRP works. That's how it was created.
So going back to some of the different systems that they have and that they admit that they use, and tying this into 9/11, the active denial system, where it heats up the molecules in your skin. When you watch some lectures from Dr. Judy Wood and some other people as well, if you go back and watch some of the videotape from 9/11, you see people jumping out of buildings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's a very good point to bring up. They say that the active denial system only goes out a 64th of an inch, but we can see from Iraq and Afghanistan that that's absolutely not true. It's they get to make a choice whether they turn on the kill frequency or not, and it's very clear that they have the choice. In this system here, and we're talking about a massive system, enough to dustify a whole high-rise, 109 stories all at one time. I mean, I can't even imagine how much energy they had to put through there to do this. Now, anybody who has tried to cook an egg in a microwave knows exactly what happened to these people. And anybody who's put something on a paper plate knows why the paper didn't burn. So really, I think that's what's going on here. They use these super high frequencies in the middle of the carrier waves, which is no different than the active denial system that they're using in the military and for crowd control here domestically. And they just crank the hell out of it. They use so much energy that everybody inside that building was being cooked.
Right. Folks, let me take a short break, and we will get right back to this, because I want to talk about this even farther so that you guys understand what actually happened, why people would jump out of a building. We will be right back. You're listening to the Region 10 Report.
Host of End the Lie Radio here on UCY.TV every Monday at 7 p.m. Pacific and 10 p.m. Eastern. Tune in and listen to some wonderful programming.
Hi, folks. Thanks for coming back with us. We have a few more minutes before our show's over. We have about 10 minutes left. So let's get back to this. These people jumped out of these buildings. Now, these people were married and had lives and had children and had everything to live for. And basically, at the point when they were jumping out of the buildings, these buildings there was no indication that they were coming down.
No, not at all. I mean, the building was just smoking. As a matter of fact, it looked like the fire was just about out when they were doing this. But they were hanging out at, the 105th floor?
So they're stripping off their clothes. Now, when we think about the active denial system and how it heats up water molecules, and how it causes incapacitating pain that you just have to, there's no choice. It's an involuntary response. You are getting out of the way of this thing. But if they're being shot down from the top, from outer space with this directed beam down toward the building, there's nowhere to go, right?
There is nowhere to go, yeah.
And if the alarm system had gone off and the sprinklers had gone off, then their clothes were wet. Mm-hmm. And so they were wet. And so is it conceivable that this active denial system times an inconceivable amount of was hitting them, and they just literally had to disrobe. They just literally had to get away, to the point where they were willing to do something that on a normal given day they would have never thought to ever jump out of 105 stories to their death. That just wasn't part of their paradigm.
It's a lot to consider. It's really a lot to consider that they were willing to do that instead of waiting it out. What it would take to just jump out of 105 stories, knowing that there's no possible way you're going to make it. It really takes a lot, and it does. It speaks very highly about what's going on here. And considering that they weren't directly, the individuals were not being directly hit with this wave, but it was a wave that was happening everywhere, is something that's very interesting to me. When you get hit with the active denial system, it's a straight energy wave hitting you right in the face. It's different. Here we've got a system that's cooking everything all around you, no matter where you are, in the building, outside the building, it's going to get you. So I think that their skin may be burning less with less clothing on, of course, it being wet. So it's a way to slow down the effect. Of course, these guys don't know what's going on, but I think that that's exactly what's going on here. They would much rather jump out of a building to their death than die in the building with what's going on, what's happening to them actively right now.
And so when Judy Wood did the math, she ended up at 1,600 people jumped to their death. Mm-hmm. That is a large amount of people to make the same conclusion while stripping off their clothing. I mean, if you're going to jump out of a building, that's one thing. But who does it half naked?
Yeah, on different floors, all around, on all four corners. I mean, these guys, independently, they made the decision that this would be better than living inside that building. And like you were saying, there was no indication this building was coming down visibly. There were no explosions going on at the time. There wasn't people shooting at them or anything like that. So what's the motivation? What was the motivation to be breaking out the windows and hanging your body out there, taking off your clothes, and then jumping to your death? Why would that be better than being inside the building?
Trying to get down.
Yeah, trying to get out of it, trying to get out of the way.
Right, trying to get down to the first floor is what I meant. So we've got a system here that uses a sine wave as the carrier wave. Then once you've got the sine wave directed at the building, it starts on a molecular level to liquefy the molecules by causing them to sway back and forth. And folks, think about it. When you take your credit card and you want to break it in half, if you bend it back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, eventually you're going to heat up the center of that bend and it's going to break.
Yeah, you just rip it apart, no problem. Right.
When before you would have to use a pair of scissors in order to get through the plastic. Mm-hmm. So that's what this microwave is doing. It's bending just like the credit card, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And then once they've got these molecules to the point where they are fluid, they jam another frequency, which would be like
it's a square wave.
The square wave.
It's a jackhammer. It just hits everything inside. It just smashes everything apart on the inside, and then they use third stage, and it's more of a triangle wave, and that's what really just shreds it. It shreds everything. And
so at the point when they use the triangle wave, is it possible that that's when we saw the actual dustification? That's when we saw the building actually falling apart? When they got to that third phase that we're summarizing could have possibly been happening?
That's the true activator. That's when all of the atomic particles start flying out. That's exactly what would be happening.
And at this point, I want to point out something to everyone. There was a Category 3 hurricane sitting right along the coastline of New York that day. No meteorologist was reporting on it at all. It was a bright and sunny day. And folks, I'm a Floridian. Right before a storm, it's bright and sunny outside. It's nice. Because all the clouds and all the weather are inside that storm. So everything ahead of it is gorgeous. And it was a gorgeous day that day. But sitting right offshore was this huge hurricane. And now hurricanes are conductive energy vortexes, correct?
Oh yeah, very heavy. Absolutely.
And
That's
so
what lightning is.
if HARRP needed a little bit extra oomph, so to speak, right? If you wanted to capitalize on this energy vortex.
Sure. Yeah, they would add the two energies together. I mean, there's a tremendous amount of electromagnetic force in there, and yeah, they would have added the two together and just slammed that building with more energy than they've ever seen before. And I think that's a very good possibility, but it's not something that we are able to confirm yet. But we're definitely on the trail.
Yeah, because you've got this funnel cloud because the swirling winds have the eye of the storm, and that's the center of circulation. That's where most of the damage happens. And the part of it that we can't see, the energy part of it that we can't see, is swirling up vertically.
Yeah, there's a central particle beam that goes straight to the ionosphere.
So exactly, and that's where HARRP is doing all of its collecting of energy, right?
Mm-hmm. So it takes that and it adds it together, multiplies it, and sends it right back down.
So HARRP is on the left, buzzing up the ionosphere. The hurricane is on the right, sending beams of energy into the ionosphere. HARRP then grabs that center of circulation energy and its own energy that's been concocting, and puts it together and then directs it down. The use of a satellite?
Well, it would be the use of a satellite, or they could just, maybe there's a lot about HARRP that we don't know yet, and that's very much on purpose. And this is a much more complicated version of HARRP, so we don't really know, but certainly it is directed, and maybe they bounced it off the ionosphere. Maybe they use satellites. There's no real way to know because they're not willing to release any of the information. But
so, is it possible that HARRP is the accessory to the crime and not the actual murderer? Is it possible that there is a technology that works in conjunction with HARRP that we don't know about?
Oh yeah, it's more than possible. It's almost guaranteed.
Okay, so this mystery technology that would have its own physical manifestation, right? Like HARRP has you can go and look at HARRP, right? If you go to Alaska, you can go and take a look at it.
Mm-hmm. Well, there are a lot of mini HARRP units, though, all along, and many countries have them now.
Yes, they do. Russia and China, as well as some of the South American countries, there are HARRP installations as well.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got all of this coming together. You've got the dustification of the buildings. You've got this energy technology, this directed energy. And the reason why it's called directed energy technology is because it takes the energy from everything and directs it into a beam to a pointed target and literally turns it to dust. And folks, this technology is sitting right now in the hands of the Israelis. And just to give you a little understanding about what they might be planning on doing, just for a few minutes, we've got Netanyahu and the Egyptian government brokering a ceasefire deal. Meanwhile, Obama is giving Netanyahu troops, and they're going to Mount Sinai. Now, a mountainous range would be perfect place to put this directed energy technology and beam and shoot it at whatever target that they have. And that is something that we might have to wait and see. And unfortunately, we're probably going to see some manifestation of that. Folks, thank you for joining us tonight. I am very happy that you stayed with us, and I'm very happy to have brought this information to you. It's been something that David and I have been wanting to talk about for quite some time. And so we'll see you next week on the Region 10 Report. Thank you so much for listening, and have a great week.